Pull the Sierra. Pulling the motor on the 62 F85. Very happy. Yeah. Everything on the engine is disconnected, correct?
I think so.
So then transmission stuff and motor mounts. And then pull tranny and motor out the top. Should have enough room. But we'll see. We'll see. Alright. Motor is out and the transmission. Right, Sierra? Not the factory transmission. It's a Buick. It's not a Dynaflow, it's a 1-speed. Maybe it is called Dynaflow, it's just a 2-speed variant, I don't know. But it's the 2-speed variable pitch torque converter Buick transmission. Which isn't ideal, because 3 speeds are nicer. And the exhaust doesn't fit right. And there's no inspection cover, because that didn't fit right. But we have an extra transmission in the car, which hopefully works. That's interesting. There's a hole right there. But the nice thing about the Buicks is that it doesn't use that torque damper plate like the Oldsmobile Rotomatic did. This uses a standard flywheel with no stupid springs in it. So we can take this flywheel. They do make performance flywheels too for like $300 if you want to put like a 700 R4 on it or something. But yeah, probably rock that parts 2-speed for now. If it's any good. If it's not a big deal to change the transmission. But pulled it all as one unit out of that tiny little hole. So didn't even drop the steering at all. But yeah, separate and mount on a stand. Alrighty, so we are just pulling the transmission off the back of the motor right now. We're gonna see how much fluid is in it. Let me pull the dipstick tube. I've got the if we can swing the dipstick tube off, might not even have to take that bolt out. Yeah, there we go. That's taken care of. We'll widen out the lens so everybody can see what I'm doing. I'll throw that 9/16 back on. We got the flex plate all disconnected. We got a couple bolts left on the bell housing. And we've got the motor sitting on a tire so that when we pull the transmission off, it doesn't become wildly unbalanced and tip the motor on the stand. I'm going to keep my feet under the back of it here, keep it from dipping too much. Oh, I can see that the bell housing is already starting to tip. So, oh, look at that. Came right off. Alright. Do this quick. Alright. And we're probably not going to use this motor for this transmission. It's just a little Buick 2-speed. There's the variable vane torque converter. It's a 2-speed unit on a 2-speed transmission. So, I mean, it's alright. It has the cool park neutral drive reverse transmission pattern, transmission shift pattern. But the nice thing about the Buicks is there's a flex plate, not one of those torque dampeners. So we can get an adapter and use this flex plate on a trans. But we'll see if we're going to be making serious power, as the goal is to put a turbo on this motor at some point. And if that happens, we'll probably put a 4-speed on it. But if it's staying naturally aspirated, we have a spare one of these in the trunk of the car. So we have two of these. And this one was making funny noises. So my plan is we'll pull the pan off the one that's in the trunk. Just take a quick peek at it, see if it's any good. We're gonna clean this motor up too, get all this grime off. There's some degreaser, hose it down once it's on the stand. Looks like we got some sealer there. That's some old school sealer though, like some gasket shellac. This motor doesn't leak oil right now, but it wasn't regularly driven when Sierra picked it up. There's a disconnected ground. We either pulled that apart or it was disconnected. Looks like we may have pulled it apart, so we'll have to fix that. But anyways, like I was saying, when Sierra bought this, it wasn't being regularly driven, so who knows what kind of oil leaks it does have. Once you run it through several heat cycles, the gaskets start misbehaving with the expanding aluminum. So we'll get it on the stand, and then we will go over the motor a little bit, about how the Oldsmobile is different from the Buick and such, like that. Alrighty, everybody, motor is on the stand. So this is a 215 cubic inch Oldsmobile engine. There's a lot of people who think that this is a Buick motor. It started with a Buick design, but this is Oldsmobile's redesign of the motor. The Buick heads, per Oldsmobile fashion, the cylinder heads do not flow as good as its other GM counterparts. So like Oldsmobile's 350, the heads don't flow as nice as Chevy 350 heads or Buick 350 heads. They're a little more restricted. They don't, and as far as like what I mean by they don't flow as nice, they don't flow as many CFM. But Oldsmobile boosted this motor, and the Oldsmobile cylinder heads are a little bit nicer. I have to confirm, but I read that there is an extra bolt per cylinder on the Oldsmobile heads than there is on the Buick heads, which is kind of nice for boost. Less, especially when you're running on the Oldsmobile motor 10 1/4 to 1 compression with boost on top of that. When the motor is running so hot, you need methanol to cool it down, the turbo rocket fluid. Oldsmobile heads are different, blocks are different. I think the intake manifolds will swap, and things like water pumps, pulleys, fuel pumps, generators, power steering pumps, air conditioning compressors, exhaust manifolds, I believe, unless it's a turbo car. Obviously, turbo manifolds won't fit on another car, but they'll bolt to the motor, but they won't work properly unless you have the rest of the turbo setup. But this is an Oldsmobile proprietary motor. They took the 215 the Buick made and later GM sold to Rover and Land Rover to put and make their 3.5 liter V8. This is Oldsmobile's version of it, called the Rocket. I'm not sure what the Buick was called, but you can see it's a little faded. It has to get repainted or new stickers put on, but there's a little rocket down the side. I think it's a little bit better on this valve cover. Yeah, there it is. So it's red. Valve cleaner, the air cleaner, the cake pan air cleaner, which sits on this, on the two barrels, it sits on this case. It seals down on that case, and then it seals down onto the air cleaner as well. That's what you get when you got the 2-barrel motor, cake pan, and it says Rocket across the side, or across the top. So the Oldsmobile motor is different, but it runs the same carburation. Until you get a turbocharged car, it runs the same carburation that the Buick motors are running, stuff like that. But very cool for the time. Aluminum block, aluminum heads, aluminum intake. This motor weighs 315 pounds, which is very impressive. For comparison, a 350 cast iron GM whatever is about between 500 and 600 pounds. I know the big block Olds 455s, 425s, those were between 600 and 700 pounds, depending on how they were equipped and depending on the year and the displacement and all that. Even the Model A engine that is very well built, Model A 4-cylinder, is 350-ish pounds. It's a little over. So this is lighter than a 4-cylinder. So that was the sort of like, I don't know, that was the advancement. The advancement from 1928 to 1960, 1961. Over those, I mean, this is insane. It's not that much bigger, but it's overhead valve, V8, all aluminum, really ahead of its time. Really a cool engine. And it's even cooler that it's in an Oldsmobile. So motor's on the stand. This is Sierra's car, so it's going to be at her pace. Whenever she wants to work on it, whatever parts she wants to buy, whenever she wants to buy them, is when the motor will be getting worked on. So, not sure exactly how fast it's going to be. I know she wants to drive it for a little bit this year. So, plan is clean it up, get a gasket set in it. Figure out we're just going to run the 2-speed Buick transmission for now. We might put a dual exhaust on this year yet. The tires are good. It's solid, but we got to get the seat rebuilt and get the seats recovered at a minimum to make it drivable. Check the brakes, service all the fluids. Brake fuel lines, they all look good. Parking brake works. I was a little concerned just because steel bolts and aluminum case, that things were going to be difficult, but no, everything has been coming apart super easy because of the desert. So very nice. But yeah, that's the motor. Pretty sweet little engine. 2-barrel. This is 8.5 to 1 compression. Pumps out a whopping 155 horsepower, I believe. If you got the 4-barrel high compression, that was 185. I think 180, somewhere around there. And then if you got the turbo car, it was 215. But we don't want to run methanol, so if we run a turbocharger with modern designs and a little bit better analog boost referencing and boost control, we should be able to get about 200 horse out of this thing. I would hopefully at least that. It'd be cool if we could match the factory 215 horse or exceed it, but we're thinking about increase in power and longevity. Another thing we improved upon is PCV valve instead of a road draft tube. So this one goes up and goes right into the manifold, just for some better crankcase ventilation, because the road draft tube is missing in this car and they just had a little cone filter. So this was just a temporary one while we were testing and running good and all that. So we have to get a PCV valve that fits this just a little better. Get a prettier setup going, but this is just pure functionality. We got to pull the valve covers off, check the valves, make sure everything's set, stuff like that. Sierra wants to run a generator still, which is respectable because it's period, but it's not the factory generator. It says okay. So I could go through and do that code and I could see exactly where it comes from. But we were having some generator issues with the car. You'd stomp on it and the lights would go out. So I'm assuming it was either this belt, it was really loose, there's a short in the generator, this broken ground wire, it may have been touching, and then when we revved it, the motor would move away from the ground because the motor mounts are shot. So motor mounts, gaskets, charging system, go through the front suspension because it has got a bit of a clunk to it. Yeah, another one of the many projects.